Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to read a few more chapters out of Fuzzy Mud. If you're following along with me, we left off on chapter 9. At the end of chapter 9, Tamaya was just going to bed after having a long day and a long walk home through the woods. Today, chapter 10, it's Wednesday, November 3rd, 2:26 a.m. So it's in the middle of the night. Tamaya slept. Marshall did not. As much as Chad had tormented him, he tormented himself even more. He lay in bed, desperate to fall asleep. He knew that he would have to be alert to deal with Chad, but sleep seldom comes to those who are desperate for it. It is something that has to be eased into, gently. He had gotten in trouble for coming home so late from school. He was supposed to have looked after the twins, and when he hadn't shown, his dad had to leave work early. The only way we can afford to keep you at Woodridge is for everyone to do their part, his father had reminded him. Good, I'll go to another school then, Marshall had answered. I hate that place. It didn't make any sense to Marshall. If his parents couldn't afford it and he hated it, then why not let him just go to another school? But that argument only made his parents angrier. And then on his way back to his room, he had accidentally stomped on the twins' hippo village, which had just caused more yelling. You're lucky I didn't step on you, he had told Daniela. The whole thing was his parents' fault, Marshall decided. His birthday was September 29th, and back when he was 4 years old, his parents had to make a choice. Either he could start kindergarten as one of the youngest kids in the class, or he could wait a year and be one of the oldest. If they had waited, he would be older, bigger, and stronger, and Chad Hilligus wouldn't even be in the same grade. How many members are in the U.S. Senate? That was the question that Mr. Davison had asked Chad. 29, Chad had suggested. Andy was the one who had laughed, not Marshall. How can there only be 29 senators, Andy had pointed out. There are 50 states. But then Mr. Davison had said, Marshall, will you kindly tell Chad how many senators there are? Right then, Marshall had known that he was doomed. He had considered giving the wrong answer, and maybe he should have, but who knows, if he had said something like 28 or 1,000,000, Chad might have thought that Marshall was mocking him. Instead, what Marshall had done was stare down at his desk and very quietly say, 100, I guess? We have 2 senators from every state. It was only a short time later that Chad had nearly thrown him down the stairs. We need to settle this once and for all, and you better be there, you thumb-sucking coward. Now, as he lay wide awake at 2:30 in the morning, Marshall tried to convince himself that since Chad had finally beaten him up, he wouldn't bother him anymore. They had settled it once and for all. Except he knew that the opposite was more likely. Now that Chad had tasted blood, he would want to come back for more, and he would come after Tamaya too. He imagined walking to school with her. She's yammering away about Monica or Calvin Coolidge or something when Chad grabs her hair and spins her around and punches her in the face. Leave her alone, Marshall shouts. Tamaya is on the ground crying. Chad is about to hit Tamaya again, but Marshall grabs his arm. I said leave her alone, butt-face. Chad shoves him. He shoves Chad back. A crowd gathers. Chad comes at him with all he's got, punching wildly, but Marshall holds his ground, ducking and hitting back. At first, Marshall hears everyone rooting for Chad, but as the fight continues, he starts to hear a few of his old friends root for him. Get him, Marshall! You can do it, Marshall! And then, as Marshall tries to fall asleep, he imagined the fight ending in different ways. Sometimes he was the winner, leaving Chad beaten and bloody, begging for mercy. Other times, Chad won, but only after a long, hard-fought battle. He envisioned himself lying on the pavement, barely able to move. 2 pretty girls from his class, Andrea Gall and Laura Muskrantz, kneel by his side and tell him how brave he was, and then they dab the blood off of his face with wet paper towels, and then Laura kisses his cheek. But even as he imagined all of this, he knew it would never happen. If Chad attacked Tamaya, the best he could hope for was that a teacher would break it up before Tamaya got hurt too badly, and then maybe Chad would be expelled, and then maybe after Chad was gone for a while, the other kids would like him again. This was the best hope that he had, and he hated himself for it because he knew it was the pathetic hope of a coward. Chapter 11, called Poof. This is excerpted from the Senate's secret hearings again. Senator Haltings says, "Of course, we all have great hope for a non-polluting, inexpensive alternative to gasoline, but my big concern, Mr. Fitzman, is what will happen when your man-made ergonoms mix with the natural environment. How will they affect plant and animal life, and ultimately human life? We just don't know." Jonathan Fitzman, "I've got that covered." Senator Haltings, the smaller something is, the harder it is to keep it contained. You could put a tiger or a grizzly bear inside of a cage, but it's a lot harder to keep a tiny microorganism from escaping. Jonathan Fitzman, "Not a problem." Senator Haltings, "If you have your way, people will be filling their cars with bioline at every gas station from Miami to Seattle. Tanker trucks will be hauling bioline across the country. Drops will spill. Accidents will happen. And then what?" Jonathan Fitzman, "Look, you got it all upside down and backward. You're all worried about ergonoms getting out, but really it's just the opposite. I'm doing all I can to keep the outside from getting in." Senator Haltings, "I'm not sure I see the difference." Jonathan Fitzman, "Ergonoms can't survive in oxygen. Expose an ergie to oxygen and poof." Senator Haltings, "Poof?" Jonathan Fitzman, "It disintegrates. Poof. You don't have to worry about ergies escaping into the air. At Sunray Farm, we had to build a special vacuum-sealed hoses and tanks just to keep the air out." Chapter 12. Now it's Wednesday, November 3rd at 7:08 in the morning. Tamaya awoke to her favorite song. Cold air came through her window, purposely left open just a crack, making the warmth of the covers that much cozier. Her music came on at 7:08 every morning because 8 was her favorite number, and Monica's favorite number was 7. Her best friend, Monica, also woke up each day at that exact time. Tamaya's thoughts drifted back to last year. There was a huge fireplace in the back of her 4th grade classroom. Her teacher had filled it with pillows, and when the students finished their work, they were allowed to go into the fireplace and read. The fireplace was so big that there was room in there for at least 4 kids, and she and Monica were usually the first 2 back there, side by side, reading their books and trying not to giggle. As Tamaya was thinking about this, a growing sense of dread slowly crept into her memories. The image of the pillowed fireplace gave way to the woods, her torn sweater, and Chad, his cold eyes staring at her as he said, "You're next, Tamaya." Her hand tingled. She brought it out from under her covers to have a look. At first, she thought that the rash had cleared, but as her eyes adjusted to the light, she realized that the red bumps were still there, covered in some kind of a powdery crust. There was powder on her pillow, too, and when she pulled back the bed sheets, she could see it all over her bed. It was a pinkish bronze color, the same color as her skin. She leapt out of bed and hurried to the bathroom. The powder washed right off, but the rash had spread. Red bumps coated her entire hand and continued down her wrist. Some of the bumps had turned into blisters. Looking at herself in the mirror, she could see a crusty area on the right side of her face. She splashed it with water and then scrubbed the entire area very hard with a soapy washcloth and very hot water. There didn't appear to be any bumps on her face. It looked a little red, but that could have been from her scrubbing so hard. Her mother's jar of Miracle hand cream was in Tamaya's bathroom. The night before, she had dabbed a little bit on each bump and then gently rubbed it in. Now, she went whole hog. She dug her fingers deeply into the chalky ointment and she pulled out a big glob of the stuff. She smeared it on thickly over the entire area. She returned to her bedroom, where she bundled up her sheets. She then took them to the washing machine. She set the temperature gauge to hot. "You're washing your sheets? Now?" Tamaya spun around. Her mother was already dressed, wearing a cranberry-colored skirt and jacket. Her eyeshadow was the same color as her clothes. Because of my rash," Tamaya told her, "so it doesn't spread." "Let me see." Tamaya held out her hand. "It looks a little better, I think," her mother said. Tamaya knew that this was because it was covered up by the hand cream, but she didn't say anything. Her mother's breath smelled like toothpaste and coffee. "Tell you what," her mother said. "You tell Marshall that I will be picking you up right after school today. I can give him a ride home too if he wants, but then I'm taking you to see Dr. Sanchez." Tamaya nodded, glad that her rash would get treated. More numbers. 2 times 64 is 128. 2 times 128 is 256. Remember, the ergonyms exponentially grow. They double. Continue to double. She put on her backpack, positioning the straps so that they covered the hole in her sweater, and then walked quickly through the house and out the door before her mother could get too good of a look at her. She still didn't know how she would explain the hole. She reached Marshall's house just as he was coming outside. He was wearing his old glasses. He had switched from glasses to contacts over the summer. She liked his glasses better. She had thought his face looked blank without them. "You're wearing your glasses," she said. He shrugged, and then he said, "I lost my contacts in the woods." Oh. In her mind, she could see Chad slugging him in the face, his contacts flying out of his eyes, although she realized it might not have happened that way at all. She could see no bruises on his face. He just looked tired and washed out, like he hadn't slept for 6 days. He dragged his feet as he walked. On other days, Tamaya had to struggle just to keep up with him. But as they continued slowly up the sidewalk, she began to worry that they might be late. Her tingling sensation had become more of a prickling. It felt as if her hand were being stabbed by 1,000 very tiny needles. "Oh, my mom is picking me up after school today," she told Marshall. "She's taking me to the doctor because I got a rash or something in the woods." She showed him her hand, but he hardly glanced at it. "You didn't tell her that we went in there, did you?" Marshall asked. "No, because if you did, we would both be in big—" "I said I didn't tell her." "Good. She can give you a ride home too if you want." "Yeah, whatever," Marshall said, but she knew he was glad for the ride, glad to be safe from Chad. They turned onto Richmond Road. There was a lot of early morning traffic, and once again, Tamaya realized just how much safer Marshall would have been if they had just walked home the usual way. She wouldn't have torn her sweater, he wouldn't have lost his contacts, and she probably wouldn't have got the rash either, she thought, although she wasn't really sure how she had gotten that. As they walked alongside the woods, that feeling of dread that she had had when she had first woken up returned. It seemed to grow a little heavier with each step. She couldn't quite pinpoint exactly what it was she was dreading. She didn't think that she was all that afraid of Chad. As long as other people were around, it was something different, something worse. It was as if she knew something terrible was about to happen, but it was so bad her brain wouldn't allow her to think about it. They reached Woodridge Lane. "This is where I was supposed to meet him," said Marshall. There was an area of weeds and dirt between the sidewalk and the fence. Tamaya figured that Chad must have climbed the fence and gone into the woods when Marshall didn't show up. At least there would have been people around, Tamaya pointed out. It was much worse than the woods. "Don't remind me," he kicked the ground. Tamaya felt sorry for him. She didn't like feeling that way. She liked it better when she used to look up to Marshall. "Chad's just a big jerk," she said. "I don't care about him," Marshall muttered. "A big fat jerk," she repeated loud enough so that if Chad was hiding nearby, he would definitely hear her. They turned onto Woodridge Lane. The woods were on both sides of them now as they headed towards the school. Tamaya quickened her pace. "We had better hurry so that we're not late," she said, but Marshall continued to lag behind. She walked faster and faster, and then something inside her made her want to run. It wasn't just the fear of being tardy. She felt scared, although of what, she didn't know. She was out of breath when she reached the line of cars backed up from the school, and only then did she stop running. And then she heard someone call her name. Marilee, Monica's little sister, was hanging halfway out of the window of her mother's Mercedes, waving to her. Tamaya waved back, using her left hand. She tried to keep her right one hidden. She waited by the curb as Marilee and then Monica climbed out of the car. "Where were you yesterday?" Monica asked. "I kept trying to call." Tamaya wanted to tell Monica everything, but didn't dare risk it. She knew that Monica would tell Hope, and then it would be all over the school. I don't know, she said. In and out. You need to get a cell phone, Monica told her. They're not allowed at school, Tamaya reminded her. Yeah, you can use it after school, said Monica. I was in and out too, said Marilee, and then I went in again, and then I went back out. Monica told her sister to shut up. So you'll never believe who I saw yesterday, she said to Tamaya. Mr. Beauchamps, said Marilee. Shut up, I'm telling her. Mr. Beauchamps. He was jogging right in front of my house. He sees me and he says, Bonjour, Mademoiselle Monique. I swear I almost lost it. Mr. Beauchamps had been their French teacher ever since the 2nd grade. You wouldn't think that a bald guy would have such hairy legs, said Monica. Tamaya forced herself to smile. Marshall was relieved to see Tamaya safely enter the building with her friend Monica with no sign of Chad. He wasn't sure what he would have done if Chad had attacked her. He liked to think that he would have tried to protect her, but he also knew that he might not have. He reached the front door. The 7th grade was located in the basement. It had been the servants' quarters, but everyone at school liked to call it the dungeon. It felt like a dungeon to Marshall. He trudged on down the stairs, doomed to whatever torture and misery awaited. Chapter 13, we'll pick up there tomorrow.